David never believed in aliens, growing up in a small town. He always thought those UFO stories were just made-up tales from people who had too much time on their hands. He was a simple computer programmer who lived a quiet life, working his 9-to-5 job and going home to his empty apartment every evening. That Tuesday night in October changed everything. David had been driving back from the city after another disappointing job interview. His old car had been making strange noises for weeks, and he kept telling himself he'd fix it when he had the money. But money was tight, and the car kept running, so he ignored the warning signs. The breakdown happened on the loneliest stretch of highway he'd ever seen, miles away from any town. With nothing but desert on both sides of the road, his phone showed no signal, and the nearest gas station was at least 20 miles away. David sat in his broken-down car, watching the sun disappear behind the mountains, wondering how his luck could get any worse. That's when he saw the lights. At first, he thought it might be a helicopter or maybe a plane flying low. But these lights moved differently. They danced across the dark sky like they were playing some kind of game. Blue, silver, and white lights that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. David got out of his car and stood on the empty highway, staring up at something that definitely wasn't following the rules of normal aircraft. The lights came closer, much closer. What landed in front of him looked like something straight out of a science fiction movie, but smoother and more beautiful than anything Hollywood had ever created. The craft was about the size of a small house, with a surface that seemed to shift between metal and something that looked almost alive. It made no sound as it touched down on the desert sand. David should have been terrified. He should have run. Instead, he felt strangely calm, like everything was going to be okay. A door that he hadn't even noticed appeared in the side of the craft, opening with a soft whisper of air. She stepped out like she was walking into her own living room. The woman looked almost human, but there was something different about her that David couldn't quite put his finger on. She was tall and graceful, with long dark hair and skin that seemed to have a faint glow in the moonlight. But it was her eyes that really caught his attention. They were silver, not gray or blue, but actually silver. Like liquid mercury, she looked at him for a long moment, and David felt like she was reading his mind, which, as it turned out, she actually was. "You are not afraid," she said, though her lips didn't move. The voice came directly into his thoughts, warm and curious. Should I be? David found himself thinking back at her. She tilted her head slightly, like a bird studying something interesting. Most of your kind would be running by now. My kind. Humans, she said the word out loud this time, her voice carrying a slight accent that he couldn't place. It was musical and strange, but not unpleasant. And you're not human, David said. It wasn't really a question. No, my name is Luna. I am from very far away. David introduced himself, still feeling like he was in some kind of dream. Luna seemed fascinated by everything about him, asking questions about his life, his work, his thoughts about existence. She learned English incredibly fast, switching from telepathy to spoken words within minutes. Your vehicle is broken, she observed, glancing at his car. Yeah, and my phone has no signal out here. I'm kind of stuck. Luna walked over to his car and placed her hand on the hood. David heard the engine turn over and purr like it was brand new. It will work perfectly now, she said simply. How did you do that? Your technology is very simple. I made some improvements. David opened the hood and stared. The engine looked exactly the same, but he could somehow tell it was different, better. This is impossible. Many things that seem impossible are simply not understood yet. They talked through the night. Luna told him she was an explorer, studying different worlds and cultures. Her people were scientists and philosophers who had long ago moved beyond the need for war or conflict. They were curious about species like humans who live with such intense emotions. Your feelings are so strong, she said, sitting beside him on the hood of his car as they watched the stars. Love, anger, hope, fear. My people evolved past most of these long ago. We find it fascinating. Is that why you're here? To study our emotions? Partly. but also because I was lonely. She looked at him with those silver eyes. My people are very logical, very calm. Sometimes I wondered what it would be like to feel the way you do. David found himself telling her things he'd never told anyone, about how alone he felt in his small apartment, about the job rejections and the feeling that life was passing him by, about his dreams of doing something meaningful with his life. Luna listened to everything with complete attention, like his words were the most important thing in the universe. When he finished talking, she reached out and touched his hand. "You have such a good heart," she said softly. "Your species may be chaotic, but you have something beautiful that we lost long ago." "What's that?" "The ability to hope even when everything seems hopeless. The strength to keep trying even after you fail." They met every night for the next week. David would finish work and drive out to their meeting spot in the desert. Luna would be waiting for him, always eager to learn more about human life. She was amazed by simple things like music, art, and the way humans could find joy in small moments. During the day, David's life started improving in ways he couldn't explain. His computer programs at work began solving problems that had stumped him for months. Ideas came to him effortlessly, and his boss started noticing his improved performance. He felt more confident, more creative, more alive than he had in years. "You're helping me, aren't you?" he asked Luna one evening. She smiled, an expression she'd learned from watching him. "I may have made some small adjustments to your technology, and perhaps I helped clear some mental blocks that were limiting your natural abilities. Why? Because I care about you. Because seeing you succeed makes me feel something I've never felt before." "What's that?" "Happy, proud, connected to someone in a way that transcends logic." David realized he was falling in love with an alien, and somehow, that felt like the most natural thing in the world. 3 months later, they had a small wedding ceremony in the desert under the stars. Luna had learned to appear completely human to others, though David always saw her true silver eyes. His few friends thought the romance was unusually fast, but they could see how happy David had become as they exchanged vows that night. With Luna's spacecraft providing a backdrop of soft, musical lights, David knew his life had become something extraordinary. He was married to someone from another world, someone who could manipulate technology with her thoughts, and saw reality from a completely different perspective. He thought he understood what that meant. He thought he was ready for anything. He had no idea that their happiness would soon attract attention from people who saw Luna not as his beloved wife, but as the discovery of a lifetime. People who would stop at nothing to capture her, study her, and use her abilities for their own purposes. The quiet computer programmer who had never believed in aliens was about to learn that some kinds of love are worth fighting for, and that his extraordinary wife had powers that went far beyond fixing broken cars. Life with Luna was like living in a fairy tale. David's small apartment transformed into something that felt more like home than anywhere he'd ever lived. Luna had a way of making everything better without changing much on the surface. The old couch became incredibly comfortable. The tiny kitchen somehow had room for everything they needed. Even the noisy neighbors upstairs seemed to quiet down. David's career took off like a rocket. The computer programs he wrote at work were solving problems that had stumped entire teams for months. His ideas flowed naturally, and every project he touched seemed to turn to gold. Within 6 months, he'd been promoted twice and was making more money than he'd ever dreamed of. But it wasn't just about the success. Luna made him feel alive in ways he'd never experienced. She would watch him work on his computer with fascination, asking questions that helped him see his own skills from completely new angles. When he came home stressed from a difficult day, she would place her hand on his forehead and somehow the tension would just melt away. Their evenings were magical. Luna would share stories about other worlds she'd visited, describing cities that floated in the clouds and oceans that glowed with their own light. David would tell her about human culture, showing her movies and music and books. She was amazed by everything, especially the way humans could create art that expressed feelings they couldn't put into words. "Your species is so young, but you create such beautiful things," she would say. listening to one of his favorite songs. We've traveled across galaxies, but we've forgotten how to make something that touches the soul like this. Everything seemed perfect. Dr. Victoria Wells had been working for a secret government research division for 15 years. Her job was to investigate unusual energy readings and unexplained phenomena that might indicate extraterrestrial activity. Most of the time, it was boring work. Weather balloons, experimental aircraft, and the occasional hoax kept her busy but never excited. The energy readings from the desert outside town were different. They appeared sporadically over several months, always in the same general area. The patterns were unlike anything in their databases. Too organized to be natural, too advanced to be human technology. When Victoria traced the readings to David's location, she expected to find some kind of experimental equipment. Instead, she found something that changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. It took weeks of careful surveillance to understand what she was looking at. David appeared to be an ordinary computer programmer, but his recent success was extraordinary. His work showed improvements that suggested access to technology, decades ahead of anything currently available. The breakthrough came when Victoria's team managed to get close-range scans of David's apartment. The readings were off the charts. Energy signatures that matched no known technology on Earth. And then they saw her. Luna appeared human in every way, but the scanners told a different story. Her cellular structure was unlike anything they'd ever encountered. Her brain activity showed patterns that suggested she was processing information at impossible speeds. Most telling of all, she was the source of the energy readings they'd been tracking. Victoria knew she'd made the discovery of the century. First contact with an extraterrestrial being, living quietly among humans as someone's wife. The implications were staggering. The technology Luna possessed could revolutionize human civilization. It could also be incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. Instead of approaching David and Luna directly, Victoria made a decision that would change all their lives forever. She reported her findings to her superiors, recommending immediate capture and study of the alien subject. The first signs of trouble were subtle. David noticed cars that seemed to follow the same route as him too often. His computer at work started running slower, like someone was monitoring everything he did. Phone calls would have strange clicking sounds, and his internet connection became unreliable. Luna noticed the surveillance before David did. Her senses were far more advanced, and she could detect the electronic equipment being used to watch them. At first, she wasn't worried. Her people had protocols for situations like this. Usually, a little adjustment to the watcher's equipment would make them lose interest and move on. But these watchers were different. They were persistent, organized, and clearly had resources behind them. When Luna tried to disrupt their surveillance equipment, they simply brought in more advanced technology. Someone was taking them very seriously. "We're being watched," Luna told David one evening as they sat in their living room. "What do you mean? Government agents. They've discovered what I am." David felt his stomach drop. "How do you know?" "I can sense their equipment. They've been scanning our home, monitoring your communications, following your movements. They know I'm not human." "What do we do?" Luna was quiet for a long moment when she looked at him. Her silver eyes held an expression he'd never seen before. Something cold and calculating that reminded him she wasn't from this world. "We prepare for trouble," she said softly. The first actual attempt came 2 weeks later. Luna had gone grocery shopping alone, something she rarely did. David was at work when he felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to call her. Her phone went straight to voicemail, 3 blocks from the supermarket. A van had pulled up next to Luna as she walked to her car. 4 people in dark suits had gotten out, clearly intending to take her somewhere against her will. They never had a chance. Luna's defensive systems activated automatically. A field of energy surrounded her, making it impossible for anyone to get within 10 feet. The would-be kidnappers found themselves unable to move toward her, like they were walking against an invisible wall that got stronger the harder they pushed. When they pulled out weapons, something even stranger happened. The devices simply stopped working in their hands. Guns wouldn't fire. tasers wouldn't charge, and their radios went completely dead. Luna looked at each of them in turn, and they felt their memories of the last are becoming fuzzy and unclear. By the time she walked away, they were standing in an empty parking lot, confused about why they were there and unable to remember what they'd been doing. But Luna knew this was just the beginning. Victoria was furious when her team reported the failed capture attempt. Not only had they been unable to secure the alien, but none of them could give a clear account of what had happened. Their equipment had failed completely, and their memories were unreliable. "She's more dangerous than we thought," Victoria told her superiors. "We need a bigger team and better equipment, or we need to eliminate the problem entirely," came the reply. That night, Luna sat David down for the most serious conversation of their relationship. "They're not going to stop," she said, "and now they see me as a threat, not just a curiosity. Can't you just make them forget about us, like you did with those people today? I can affect a few minds at a time, but not an entire organization. And if I use too much of my abilities, I risk drawing attention from my own people. They might decide Earth isn't safe for me anymore." David took her hands in his. "What does that mean?" "It means they might make me leave, and I won't be allowed to return." The thought of losing Luna was unbearable. David had never imagined he could love someone so completely. She wasn't just his wife. She was the reason his life had meaning. "Then, we fight," he said simply. Luna looked at him with something between admiration and worry. "David, you don't understand what you're saying. These people have resources, weapons, technology. You're just one human." "No," David said, pulling her closer. "I'm one human who's married to the most amazing being in the universe. And if they want to take you away from me, they're going to have to go through me first." Luna smiled, but her silver eyes held shadows of something darker. She was beginning to realize that protecting the man she loved might require her to become something she'd never been before, something her peaceful people had evolved beyond long ago, something dangerous. The attack on their home came at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. David woke up to Luna's hand on his shoulder, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "They're here," she whispered. Through the bedroom window, David could see dark figures moving around their building. At least a dozen people in tactical gear, carrying equipment he didn't recognize. This wasn't some quick grab attempt like the grocery store incident. This was a full-scale military operation. "Stay behind me," Luna said, and for the first time since he'd known her, her voice carried something cold and alien. The front door exploded inward. David expected men with weapons to come rushing through, but instead there was just empty space. The attackers had hit some kind of invisible barrier that Luna had created around their apartment. "Impossible," he heard someone shout from outside. The breach charges should have worked. Luna stood in their living room, her arms outstretched, and David could see energy flowing around her like heat waves. The air itself seemed to shimmer and bend. Whatever technology the attackers had brought, it was useless against what Luna could do. Enhanced equipment ineffective, came a voice through their broken door. "Target is using unknown defensive measures." David watched through the window as the tactical team regrouped. They had trucks full of equipment that looked like something from a science fiction movie, dishes that probably disrupted electronics, weapons that fired energy instead of bullets, and scanning devices that hummed with power. None of it mattered. Luna's barrier held against everything they tried. But David could see the effort was costing her. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her breathing was becoming labored. She was incredibly powerful, but she wasn't invincible. "How long can you keep this up?" he asked. "Long enough," she replied, but he could hear the strain in her voice. The attackers tried for 3 hours before giving up. When they finally withdrew, Luna collapsed onto their couch, exhausted. "They'll be back," she said, "and next time they'll bring even more advanced equipment. Can we run? They'll follow us anywhere we go. And now they know what I'm capable of. They won't take chances." David held her close, feeling helpless. His wife could create energy barriers and disable advanced technology with her mind. But she was still one person against an entire government organization. "There has to be something we can do." Luna looked at him with an expression that was both loving and terrifying. There is, but you might not like what I become if I do it. Victoria was beyond frustrated. To failed attempts, millions of dollars in damaged equipment, and her superiors were starting to question whether she was the right person for this job. The alien was clearly more powerful than anyone had anticipated. We need a different approach, she told her team during the morning briefing. Direct confrontation isn't working. What do you suggest? Asked her second in command. We go after the husband. It made perfect sense. The alien clearly cared about David, which made him both a weakness and a weapon. If they could capture him, they could force her to cooperate. The plan was simple. Wait until David was at work, isolated from his wife's protection, and take him during his lunch break. Once they had him, they could negotiate with the alien from a position of strength. What Victoria didn't understand was that Luna had technology that could monitor every electronic communication in the city. She knew about the plan before the tactical team even left their base. David was eating lunch in the parking garage at his office building when it happened. 3 people approached him from different directions, moving casually like they belonged. There, he recognized the setup immediately from action movies and started walking quickly toward the stairwell. He almost made it. The drug they used was fast-acting. One moment David was running up the stairs, the next he was struggling to keep his eyes open as strong hands grabbed his arms. Don't fight it, someone said. You'll just hurt yourself. David's last conscious thought was wondering if Luna would know what had happened to him. She knew. Luna felt the moment David lost consciousness like a physical blow. The connection between them was deeper than most humans could understand. A bond that operated on levels beyond the physical world. She also knew exactly where they were taking him. The government facility was 30 miles outside the city, hidden in a complex that officially didn't exist. Luna's scanning abilities let her see through their walls like they were made of glass. David was unconscious in a medical room, connected to monitoring equipment but apparently unharmed. For now, Luna stood in their apartment, looking at the broken door and the scorch marks on the walls from the morning's attack. She thought about David's kindness, his gentle nature, the way he'd accepted her completely despite everything that made her different. Then she thought about the people who had taken him, who saw her as nothing more than a specimen to be studied and used. Something changed in Luna that afternoon. The peaceful, curious explorer who had fallen in love with human emotions made a decision that would have horrified her people back home. She was going to get her husband back, and she was going to make sure no one ever threatened them again. The first sign that something was wrong came when all the electronics in the government facility started malfunctioning at exactly 6:47 p.m. Computers crashed, security cameras went blank, and the communication systems went dead. Victoria was in the command center when the lights went out. Generator power should have kicked in. Someone shouted in the darkness. It did. Something is draining all our power sources. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting eerie shadows throughout the complex. Through the reinforced windows, Victoria could see something moving in the darkness outside. It looked like stars had come down to Earth. Luna walked through their defenses like they weren't there. Motion detectors couldn't track her. Locked doors opened at her approach, and armed guards found their weapons simply wouldn't function when pointed in her direction. But the most terrifying thing was her face. The gentle, curious expression David loved was gone. In its place was something cold, alien, and absolutely focused. She found David in the medical wing, still unconscious, but unharmed. The monitoring equipment around his bed showed he was in normal sleep, not a drug-induced coma. Someone had been careful not to hurt him, which was the only reason those people were still alive. Luna placed her hand on David's forehead, and he opened his eyes immediately. Luna, how did you get here? I came to take you home, she said softly. Then her silver eyes hardened as she looked around the room. And to teach some people a very important lesson, David sat up, feeling perfectly alert despite having been unconscious moments before. Are you okay? You look different. I'm fine, but I'm done being patient with people who threaten my family. As they left the medical room, David saw government agents running through the corridors in panic. Some were trying to restart computer systems that refused to work. Others were attempting to call for backup on radios that produced only static. One agent tried to stop them as they walked toward the exit. He raised his weapon, then looked down in confusion as it crumbled to dust in his hands. "How are you doing this?" David whispered. "I'm not hiding anymore," Luna replied. They wanted to see what an alien could do. Now they're finding out. Victoria watched through a security camera that somehow still worked as the alien, and her husband walked out of the facility like they were leaving a hotel. Every defensive measure had failed. Every weapon was useless. Every piece of technology in the building was under the aliens' control. For the first time since this all began, Victoria realized she might have made a terrible mistake. Outside, Luna stopped and turned back toward the building. She looked directly at the camera Victoria was watching through, and her silver eyes seemed to glow with their own light. When she spoke, her voice came through every speaker in the facility simultaneously. "You took my husband. You threatened our home. You tried to treat me like an animal to be captured and studied." Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made everyone listening feel like insects being examined by something vast and incomprehensible. "I am being merciful because David taught me about forgiveness. But if you ever threaten us again, if you ever come near our home, if you ever even think about hurting the person I love, you will discover that there are things in this universe far worse than death." The cameras went dead. The speakers fell silent, and Luna walked away into the night with her husband, leaving behind a building full of people who would never again underestimate what love could drive someone to do, even someone who wasn't entirely human. After the rescue from the government facility, David thought their troubles were over. Luna had shown her power, made her point, and walked away. Surely the authorities would leave them alone now, understanding they were dealing with something far beyond their ability to control. He was wrong. Dr. Victoria Wells had built her entire career on being the person who solved impossible problems. The idea of giving up, of admitting defeat to an alien, was something she simply couldn't accept. If anything, seeing Luna's abilities firsthand only made Victoria more determined to find a way to capture and study her. "We need a new approach," Victoria told her remaining team members during an emergency meeting. Half her staff had requested transfers after the facility incident, but the core group remained. "Direct confrontation clearly doesn't work. Maybe we should just leave them alone," suggested one of the younger agents. "They're not hurting anyone. The husband seems like a decent guy, and the alien has only acted defensively." Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. "That thing destroyed millions of dollars in equipment and humiliated our entire organization. We can't let that stand. Besides, think about what we could learn from her technology. We could revolutionize defense, medicine, space travel. We could change the world." What Victoria didn't realize was that Luna was listening to every word. The technology Luna possessed made human surveillance systems look like children's toys. She could monitor any electronic communication, see through any camera, and even sense the electrical patterns of human thoughts from miles away. She knew about every meeting, every plan, every attempt to find their weaknesses. More importantly, she was learning about the people who refused to leave her family alone. Luna discovered that Victoria had been involved in other questionable projects. Over the years, experiments on people without their consent, cover-ups of civilian casualties, a pattern of putting her ambitions above basic human decency. The more Luna learned, the less mercy she felt inclined to show. But it wasn't just Victoria. The entire organization was built on secrets and lies. They took people who asked inconvenient questions and made them disappear. They stole technology from inventors and claimed it for the government. They had been operating outside the law for decades, protected by people in high places who benefited from their discoveries. Luna made a decision that would have shocked her peaceful people back home. She wasn't going to just defend anymore. She was going to dismantle this entire organization, piece by piece, person by person. The first sign something was wrong came when Agent Robert Chen woke up in his bedroom to find all his furniture rearranged, exactly as it had been when he was 8 years old. His adult furniture was gone, replaced by a child's bed, cartoon posters, and toys he remembered from decades ago. Even his clothes had changed to pajamas he'd worn as a kid. When he looked in the mirror, he saw his adult face, but the room around him insisted he was still a child. His wife found him an hour later, sitting on the tiny bed, crying like he was 8 years old again. "This isn't real," he kept saying. "I'm an adult. I have a job. I have responsibilities." But the room disagreed. And somehow, part of his mind believed the room, Agent Lisa Park, had a different experience. She started seeing her reflection doing things she wasn't doing. When she brushed her teeth, her reflection would wave at people who weren't there. When she tried to eat breakfast, her reflection would make faces and laugh silently. During an important meeting with Victoria, her reflection stood up and started dancing while she sat perfectly still. The worst part was that other people could see it too. Her colleagues started avoiding her, whispering that she was having some kind of breakdown. Her husband suggested she see a doctor. Her children began to be afraid of mirrors when she was around. For Agent Michael Torres, reality itself became unreliable. He would walk into his office to find it decorated for Christmas in July, complete with snow falling inside the building. He would drive to work and end up in the parking lot of his elementary school, with no memory of how he got there. During briefings, he would hear everyone speaking in children's songs instead of normal conversation. Each incident lasted just long enough for him to question his sanity. Then everything would return to normal. But the experiences felt completely real while they happened, leaving him exhausted and constantly on edge. Victoria watched her team falling apart and knew exactly who was responsible. The alien was playing with them, demonstrating that she could reach into their lives and twist reality however she wanted. It was psychological warfare on a level that no human military had ever conceived. "She's in our heads," Victoria told her superiors during a secure video call. "She can manipulate what we see, what we remember, maybe even what we think." "Then stop her," came the reply. "Use whatever resources you need." "I don't think you understand. She's not just hiding from us. She's hunting us." Victoria was right. Luna wasn't content to simply defend herself and David anymore. She had studied human psychology and understood exactly how to break down the people who threatened her family. She wasn't hurting them physically, but she was destroying their confidence, their relationships, and their ability to function. The breaking point came when Victoria herself became a target. It started small. Victoria would find her coffee cup empty when she was certain she'd just filled it. Her computer would show files she'd never created, all containing detailed records of her most questionable decisions over the years. Her phone would play recordings of conversations she'd had in private, conversations that should have been impossible to record. Then things escalated. Victoria began seeing people who weren't there. Former colleagues who had died in suspicious circumstances would appear in her office, staring at her accusingly. Subjects from her failed experiments would sit in her living room, showing her the scars from procedures she'd authorized. The worst was when she started seeing herself. Multiple versions of Victoria would appear throughout her day, each one representing a different choice she could have made. The Victoria who had chosen to be a teacher instead of a government agent. The Victoria who had reported illegal activities instead of participating in them. The Victoria who had shown mercy instead of ambition. These other Victorias would follow her around, commenting on her decisions and asking her why she'd chosen to become the person she was. They knew things about her that no one else knew, secrets she'd buried so deep she'd almost forgotten them herself. "You could have been better," they would say. "You had chances to do the right thing, and you chose power instead." Victoria tried therapy, medication, even took leave from work. Nothing helped. The visions continued, growing more vivid and more personal every day. Her marriage crumbled when she started talking to people who weren't there during dinner. Her friends stopped calling when she began asking them about conversations they'd never had. Meanwhile, Luna was systematically exposing every secret the organization had kept for decades. Classified documents appeared on news websites. Recordings of illegal activities found their way to journalists. Evidence of cover-ups materialized in the offices of government oversight committees. But Luna was careful. She never left digital fingerprints or obvious traces of her involvement. Everything appeared to be the result of whistleblowers, security breaches, or simple accidents. The organization found itself under investigation from a dozen different agencies, all acting on evidence that had mysteriously appeared at exactly the right time. David watched all of this happening and felt a growing unease about his wife. Luna still looked the same, still treated him with the same love and gentleness. But there was something different in her silver eyes now. Something cold and calculating that reminded him she wasn't human. "Don't you think this has gone far enough?" he asked her one evening as they watched the news report on another government scandal. "They tried to take you away from me," Luna replied simply. "They treated us like animals to be captured and studied. This is what happens to people who threaten my family. But some of these people are just doing their jobs. They're not all bad." Luna looked at him with an expression he'd never seen before. For just a moment, he felt like she was seeing him the way she might see an interesting, but ultimately insignificant insect. "David," she said gently, "you're human. You think in terms of individual guilt and innocence, right and wrong. But this organization is like a disease. You don't negotiate with cancer. You remove it completely." The casual way she said it made David's blood run cold. He realized that his loving wife, the gentle alien who had been fascinated by human emotions, had learned something from their conflict that she was never supposed to learn. She had learned to hate.